I can hear the music humming somewhere in the night. Those notes are drumming, pounding in my head. I can feel something screaming deep inside my soul, but the words I long to say remain
Hello, welcome to episode 3. We've reached a very important stage in our discussion. We are ready to proceed into the heart of the argument for the existence of God. 2 quick reminders. If you're able to watch these segments in order, it's helpful. Number 2, and I've mentioned this a number of times, please put aside any preconceived notions you may have about this. Any preconceived notions you may have about what I'm going to say, about what my argument is, about what the angle is that I'm taking. Listen with an open mind and then make your decisions. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much. We have now established that the critical and fundamental difference between Darwinian evolution and origin of life. And we've made it very clear that we are going to focus on origin of life as the key scientific issue regarding the existence of God. With keeping those 2 things in mind, we're ready to proceed. Now, obviously, if we're going to discuss the origin of life and the existence of God from the viewpoint of the believer, it's going to revolve around what has classically been called the argument from design in one form or another. Now, in my opinion, and I'll try to demonstrate this to you, in my opinion, the argument from design has been distorted and misrepresented, and that's caused confusion. And I will point that out as we go along. The argument as I present it is extraordinarily simple. In fact, it's so simple, I wouldn't even call it an argument. It is a given. It is a fundamental assumption about the way all human beings perceive reality. So from this point forward, anytime I mention the argument from design, I mean the following 3 points. Please listen carefully. Number 1, the existence of my shirt itself is the proof of the existence of the tailor who made that suit. I don't need my shirt. I don't need any other evidence. The existence of a poem on a piece of paper. Theirs was not to reason why, theirs was but to do or die. Into the jaws of death rode the 600. That poem, written on a piece of paper, is itself the proof of the existence of the poet who created that poem. No other evidence is necessary. And the existence of my watch, or the existence of a clock such as this, is itself the proof of the existence of the watchmaker who created that watch. No other evidence is necessary. That's point number 1. Of course, I've used 3 different examples to really sort of make the same point there. Number 2, suits, poems, and watches do not make themselves. They are not assembled by unguided processes. They are the result of an intelligent act of creation. Suits, poems, and watches do not make themselves. That's point 2. And point 3, and this is really the critical one, the exact same thing applies to anything that we decide is in the category of a suit, a poem, or a watch. If we decide something is in the category of a suit, a poem, or a watch, it means that that object, the existence of that object itself, is the proof of the existence of the creator of that object. The existence of the object itself is the proof that it could not have made itself or was not assembled by unguided forces. Now, obviously, that last point, point number 3, is the crucial issue here. What exactly does go into the category of a suit, a poem, or a watch? And it is around that point which the controversy will revolve. So, it then becomes critical for us to understand and analyze, why is it that we accept as an incontrovertible truth that every single watch in existence was made by a watchmaker? And I'm going to use the watch or the clock to represent all of them. We are absolutely certain that this was made by a watchmaker. We are as certain that it was made by a watchmaker as we are certain that 2 + 2 = 4. In fact, we are so certain that if somebody expressed doubts about that proposition, we would express doubts about that person's sanity. So how do we know? And now we've come to the first point of confusion. Many people say, you know how we know that all watches are made by watchmakers? From experience. Well, we've experienced it. We know from experience that all watches are made by watchmakers. And that is a terrible, terrible mistake. A terrible point of confusion. That is an absolute falsehood. We do not know from experience. And I can demonstrate it to you very easily. I ask you all a simple question, and I include myself. How many people out there have experienced this being made by a watchmaker? And the answer, of course, is none of you. This watch, this clock, none of you experienced this being made by a watchmaker. Well, if you didn't experience it, remember, experience is limited in time and space. If you didn't experience it being made by a watchmaker, how could you possibly say that you know from experience that it was made by a watchmaker? I repeat, you didn't experience it. Therefore, you can't possibly know from experience. In fact, based on our very limited experience, how could we possibly know how the untold billions upon billions upon billions of watches and clocks in existence in our world, how they were assembled? What people mean, what they really mean when they say that this watch, that we know from experience that watches were put together by watchmakers, what they really mean is the following, and please pay close attention. This is what they mean. We do know from experience that there are many watchmakers sitting and making watches. We do know from experience that many watches are made by watchmakers. This is very similar, or almost the same, as all those watches and clocks that we do know from experience were made by watchmakers. Ergo, therefore, since this is very similar and the same, it must be that this was also made by a watchmaker. In other words, since clock B strongly resembles clock A, everything that applies to A applies to B. That is not an argument from experience. That is what is known in philosophy as an argument from analogy. In other words, this is analogous, similar to the other watch or clock, and therefore you want to say that everything that applies to that one applies to this one. Now, anyone involved in these types of discussions knows that an argument from analogy is not a very strong argument at all. In fact, it's one of the weaker arguments that you can present. Why? Very simple. Because the strength of the argument is all in the eyes of the beholder. You think it's a really good analogy? Well, then it's a really good argument. You think it's a problematic analogy, or an analogy about which we can raise doubts? Well, then it's a problematic argument. The real problem is there's no actual logical connection between your two statements. Just because it's similar doesn't mean that the same things apply. By the way, it doesn't mean that you're wrong either. Maybe it does apply. Maybe the fact that it's similar means that really all the same things do apply. But maybe it doesn't. In other words, there's a certain element of inconclusiveness about an argument from analogy. And one thing is for sure, it doesn't get you anywhere near the clarity of 2 plus 2 equals 4. So someone will then remark, well, come on, what are you talking about? What other process could possibly produce a clock like this other than a watchmaker? That's what's known in philosophy as an argument from ignorance. Just because you don't know of any other process that could produce this doesn't mean that there isn't such a process. It doesn't mean you're wrong either. Maybe there isn't. But just because you don't know about it, just because you aren't aware of any such process, doesn't mean that such a process doesn't exist. And no matter how you cut the pie here, your argument from analogy plus your argument from ignorance gets you nowhere near the clarity of 2 plus 2 equals 4. And make no mistake about it, we are as certain that as 2 plus 2 equals 4, that this was made by a watchmaker. And that is about as certain as a human being can be about anything in this world and anything in their life. So, how do we know? Why are we so certain that this was made by a watchmaker? Stay tuned, because we're going to answer that question in episode 4. Take care, have a great day, God bless.
I can hear the music humming somewhere in the night. Those notes are drumming, pounding in my head. I can feel something screaming deep inside my soul, but the words I long to say remain unsaid. Hey, I'm searching, searching, searching for a song, a melody that gives me wings to fly. Hey, I'm searching, 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 searching for a song. Keep looking for it till the day I die. Well, I've seen so many start to climb, seen so many fall, and I've seen even more who never even tried. But this emptiness inside keeps driving me on. I don't think I'll ever know the reason why. Hey, I'm searching, searching, searching for a song, a melody that gives me wings to fly. Hey, I'm searching, 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 searching for a song. Keep looking for it till the day I die. Whoa. Search the heavens, they search the 7 seas, they search the sky and the earth below. And most of them don't even know what they're looking for. If they found it, they wouldn't even know. Hey, I'm searching, searching, searching for a song, a melody that gives me wings to fly. Hey, I'm searching, 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 searching for a song. Keep looking for it till the day I die. I'll keep looking for it till the day I die.